Wake up, everybody, no more sleeping in bed. No more backward thinking, time for thinking ahead. The world has changed so very much from what it used to be. There's so much hatred, war and poverty. Wake up all the teachers, time to teach a new way. Maybe then they'll listen to what you have to say. 'Cause they're the ones who's coming up and the world is in their hands. So when you teach the children, teach them the very best you can. The world won't get no better if we just let it be. Na 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 na. The world won't get no better. We gotta change it now, just you and me. Wake up all the doctors, make the old people well. They're the ones who suffer and who catch all the hair. But they don't have so very long before their judgment day. So won't you make them happy before they pass away? Wake up all the builders, time to build a new land. I know we could do it if we all lend a hand. The only thing we have to do is put it in our minds. Surely things will work out, they do it every time. The world won't get no better if we just let it be. Na, 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 na. The world won't get no better. We gotta change it now, just you and me. Yeah. Change it, yeah, change it, yeah, just you and me. Change it, yeah, change it. Can't do it alone, can't do it alone. Need some help, y'all, y'all. Can't do it alone, can't do it alone. Yeah, yeah. Wake up, everybody. Wake up, everybody. Need a little help, y'all. Yes, I do. Need a little help. Say it, boy. Need some help, y'all. Change the world, what it used to be. Can't do it alone. Can't do it alone. Need some help, yeah. Need some help, yeah. Wake up, everybody. Get up, get up, get up, get up. Wake up. Come on, come on. Wake up, everybody. Teach a new way. Maybe then they'll listen what you have to say. Wake up, everybody. No more sleeping in bed. No more about to thinking. Time for thinking ahead. Come on now. Wake up, everybody. I'm talking about don't push up. Stop pushing that don't push. Don't use up. Stop using the dope. Wake up. Yeah. Well, hey, wonder what you tell me now. Wonder what you tell me now. False lying, false preaching, yeah, yeah. False teaching, yeah. Wake up, y'all. Come on. You preachers, stop preaching what you teach. Teach the truth. Wake up, preachers. Liars, politicians. Well, stop lying. Stop lying.
Good evening, everybody, or good afternoon, wherever this finds you, in whatever time zone. Looks like we've got folks coming in from all over the place. As you're coming into the room, feel free to share in the chat where it is you're based right now. Where are you calling in from? And also the name of a young changemaker that inspires you. Someone that comes to mind anywhere at all in the world. And welcome. We'll give folks a few minutes to join us. Talia Moreno inspires me too. We're lucky enough to have her with us tonight, Cole as well. When we get started, we'll have a chance to dive in, but if you're just joining us now, share in the chat where you're joining from and a young changemaker that inspires you. We also want to remind folks that we have a giveaway, a generous giveaway from Talia, some of her artwork tonight. And so for those of you who can have the opportunity to tweet and live tweet or send a tweet out about this session using the hashtag Young Changemakers and @WorldSavvy, you will be entered into a contest to receive some free artwork from Talia, and we'll get a chance to take a look at what that artwork looks like and hear a little bit more from her later as well. Welcome, Catherine. Great to see folks joining from all over the country. Again, if you are tweeting this event today using the tag @WorldSavvy and the hashtag Young Youth Changemakers, you'll be entered for a contest to give away tomorrow for some artwork that was created by Talia, who's one of our panelists tonight. It's incredibly beautiful. And we'll get started just in a moment. We're just waiting for a few more folks to join us. Okay, it is 4 p.m. And so when we're gonna get started, and I'll introduce myself. My name's Dana Mortensen, and I am the CEO and co-founder of WorldSavvy. We are the presenting organization here tonight in collaboration with Youth Prize, and I'm lucky enough to be joined by Youth Prize's incoming new president as of January 1st, Marcus Pope, Talia Moreno, who is the production director for Bridgemakers, and also Cole Stevens, who is the new Chief Creative Officer, new title for Bridgemakers. So I'm incredibly excited for our discussion tonight. Want to introduce those of you who are new to WorldSavvy. Hopefully some of you who are joining us tonight are new to our work. We are a national education nonprofit entering our 20th year of work to educate and inspire youth to learn, work, and thrive as responsible global citizens. So our work is across the country, working in whole school partnerships to help create student-centered learning environments that inspire students to take positive social action. So incredibly excited to see we've got some of our students here, some of our supporters, our board members, students that we've worked with and have been lucky enough to collaborate with. So this event is the third in a series, a Changemaker event series that WorldSavvy has been hosting. This is a way in times. Everyone joining us tonight is probably completely aware of the environment that we're operating in, a global pandemic, a spike in Omicron, and thank you for joining us, and a real hearty, we hope you are well, and want to hold space for those of you who are navigating probably all manner of challenges. And this seems a really opportune time for the subject at hand to talk about youth-led systems change. When we look out at a VUCA world, a volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous world, there is no question that we need new problem solvers, a generation of new thinkers, new change makers, and creative problem solvers that are going to address that. And so that's what we've brought together here today. And it's really an honor and a privilege to have this conversation. So we're going to dive in and get talking about what brings us to this dialogue and some of the lessons learned and the playbook around youth-led systems change. So I want to start by giving each of you just a chance, a minute or two, to introduce yourselves and what brought you to this moment and the work that you're doing to advocate for systems change. And so maybe Cole, we'll start with you, and Talia, and then kind of work around, and Marcus, you can round us out.
Thank you so much, Dana. All right. Hello, everybody. Thank you all for coming today. Super excited about this conversation. So yeah, basically, my name is Cole Stevens. I am one of the co-founders at Bridgemakers. It's really good to see some SVP friends on here today too. Yeah, so really my story kind of started in systems change when I was laid off from my job, and I'd been working to pay bills and whatnot. And just like everyone else, I tried to get unemployment benefits. But the state of Minnesota at the time had a law preventing high school students from doing that. So we'll get into more of how that adventure started. But it's got a happy ending, so don't worry about that. And I got to keep my money. But yeah, I've had a lot of problems with the school system. I've always been a creative thinker. I'm a musician, as you can see, and a producer. And I've often just had a lot of my ideas shut down because they're outside the box. So as Chief Creative Officer of Bridgemakers, what I do is think outside the box, help people start their own businesses, initiatives, and social impact ventures. And super excited to dive in and just talk about how we can all do that for young people. So thank you.
So I'm Talia Marino. I'm the production director at Bridgemakers. I want to say, just like Cole, I had trouble in school. I wasn't much of a change maker. I was kind of a troublemaker. It felt like I was coasting all throughout high school, and it's hard to feel like staff cares when you feel like you go unnoticed. So in my senior year, I went to an alternative school, and in alternative school, I created a character, Sal, and Sal was one of my main motivators to get me to positions of new opportunities. Sal really helped me hone in on my creativity and my artistry. It created a pathway to production, including like screen printing, embroidery, sticker printing, and so forth. And I feel now more than ever that I'm on my feet, and through the work with Bridgemakers, I don't want other students to be slipping through the cracks of education like I was. And I want to share this excitement and hopefully make high school experience better for students.
Thanks, Talia. And I don't know of a change maker that's not also a troublemaker. So you're right on. Marcus Pope, as Dana mentioned, president of Youth Prize, super excited to be partnering with World Savvy, a longtime partner of Youth Prize, for this event and to be in the presence of amazing young people connected to Bridgemakers, one of our closest partners who we've worked really hard with over the last 18 months. So excited to be here. Youth Prize, our mission is to increase equity with and for Minnesota's Indigenous, low-income, and racially diverse young people. We take with and for very seriously. We're very intergenerational. Half of our board is comprised of young people between the ages of 16 and 25. We have folks who are connected to Bridgemakers on our board as well. A little bit about me. I'm someone who started working very young at the Science Museum of Minnesota. And in my the early days of my career, I recognized what we call now inequity. I directed camps, and before that I was a camp counselor. So I would direct camps in all areas, around the metro area, in Hopkins, Edina, in North Minneapolis, and in St. Paul. And there would be different types of camps I would either be a counselor for or direct. There would be fee-for-service camps or grant-funded camps. And in directing camps, I recognized that there were some camps where parents would drive up in cars that I had never seen before, luxury vehicles. Other camps, we had to provide transportation because the families didn't have transportation. We would have camps where we would talk about just places around the world and the science connected to places around the world, where kids who had been to those places around the world and other kids who hadn't been across the river to either St. Paul or to Minneapolis. And so growing up year after year, directing these camps or being a counselor within these camps, I recognized this inequity, and I came to the conclusion very early in my career as a young person that the inequities that we had was not about young people, it was about society. And that society was organized in a way that was wrong. And I very early on wanted to do something to change it. And so that's why I'm here today at Youth Prize. And that's what motivates me in a lot of things that I witnessed back as a young person. It seems like we're starting to recognize it. We'll see. You know, post George Floyd was a wake-up call here in the Twin Cities. But there's still a lot of work that we need to do. And so it's great that we're recognizing some of the inequities. We're recognizing the need to engage young people more authentically in the change or people who are impacted. So I'm just super excited to see Talia and Cole here, and that Youth World Savvy is organizing this convening to talk about a very important topic, because young people have always been at the center of change throughout history. What movement hasn't been sparked by the ingenuity and creativity of young people? So this is an important conversation. So thank you for convening it, Dana.
Maybe even more excited to have it. Thank you all for the intro. So let's dive right into it. A lot of folks who are on who are in this Zoom call with us tonight don't know the story of sort of the magic you were able to create together. So Cole, you alluded to kind of stumbling into not accessing unemployment benefits. Tell us about the process. What happened? What was the challenge? What was the process that you and Bridgemakers and Youth Prize undertook to try and address it? And what was the outcome?
For sure. So first off, I'll just get started to say that my story that I'm about to tell is one that actually we see all over Minnesota and all over the country. I've been working in different capacities since I was like 12 and helping my family to pay bills. Got my first official job at 14, bike shop, moving around, flipping burgers, fixing bikes, just doing my part, right? Doing my part in the economy, doing service people and paying bills. So that is a story that actually is a reality for a lot of young people today, who are secondary or even primary breadwinners. And so basically in the pandemic, everybody was getting support, obviously, because this is something like we have never seen before. The state of Minnesota was actually unique in a lot of ways in that we were the only the only state kind of in the upper Midwest, right? All of the surrounding states didn't do this. We were the only one that decided that, unemployment benefits, that's really helpful to people, but high school students, they don't need to get all that. So basically, this is a blanket prohibition against high school students receiving unemployment benefits, regardless of how many hours you worked, regardless of your actual, eligibility otherwise on the basic level. And so for me, I actually was one of those young people that they wanted to mess with. And a mistake that they made was that they had given me the money, even though I had signed the thing that I was in high school, all that. And then after me being ignorant to this law, because of course they never tell you about the laws, they never make it easy for you. I had actually used this money to pay bills. I put food in the fridge. I paid the internet bill. Put the rent through, and then they gave me a letter back like about 10 days later, demanding all of that money back. And so it was at this point, kind of like Talia, I never considered myself a change maker, troublemaker. But this was like the fire that lit up under me. I was like, this is ridiculous. This is absolutely ridiculous. And then I started hearing about other young people having this problem. So anyway, originally I was really just looking for a lawyer or something, like somebody who could like give me some pro bono help. And I ended up stumbling upon the most amazing thing I'd ever seen at the time, a group of young people with a group of mentors and amazing community leaders working together to try and fix this. Now, Marcus was one of those community leaders mentoring us. And the other co-founder of Bridgemakers and our president, Walter Cortina, was the young person leading the charge on this. So that's how I met really the whole squad. And I was just right away super into it. So we jumped in right away. We're talking to legislators all around the state. And when you're talking to legislators, if you really want to get to them, you got to get to their constituents. So we're talking to just people in greater Minnesota, trying to hit the suburbs, trying to obviously get our base in the Twin Cities. And the whole name of the game here is trying to get these people to understand that we're not just using this money to like go buy a new pair of shoes. we're not just using this money to go to a movie theater. Can't even go to a movie theater, right? It's COVID. But that we really need this for our futures. I mean, when young people can't even put food in the fridge, how are we going to be thinking about starting our own businesses, getting higher education, and financial planning and investing in ourselves and our future? So, the basic thing that really I think got this through was that, like, we were bipartisan. We had older leaders that were helping the younger people who had all the energy and anger, right, to be able to like push this. And we just bridged every gap we could think of: generational, socioeconomic, racial gaps, political gaps. We just tried to bridge every division, and there was so much division amongst our country during COVID, murder of George Floyd, subsequent craziness. There's so much division. We were in here trying to be that unifying force. And anyway, it took about a year and then some, but we ended up suing the state of Minnesota, winning $70 million that got out to the community, specifically towards those young people who need to pay bills, directly deposited to their account. And then going into effect this year, we've actually changed Minnesota state law. We got the bill through, signed into law by the governor, that will now treat high school students just like any other worker in our state, basically. And so, yeah, we'll talk more about kind of that how that happened and how it works so well. But if this is like the most amazing example of youth-led systems change and the mentorship and how the older generations can actually enable an environment like that. So we'll get more into that.
Thank you. That's a lot of zeros. $70 million out into the community. That's incredible. And I want to know from both Talia, you and Cole, your perspective. We'll get to hear from you in a little bit, Marcus. What about the relationship? We know so often when folks talk about working with youth or empowering youth or whatever the framing is, that so often youth are sort of on the table, not at the table, or they're participating but not leading, or there's tokenism around what youth engagement actually looks like. So what was different working with Youth Prize? What was different with these sort of the adult youth partnership that you were able to create? Tell me a little bit about those enabling factors from your perspectives.
I will say I didn't work too heavily on the campaign, but I will say since like joining Bridgemakers, I've had mentors such as John Bacall and our good friend Pablo, who's taught us a lot with video editing. And I will say it is very different talking to them, like, because they just treat me like them. Like I am a part of the table. I am another adult to them in their eyes. And it's very empowering when you are treated with that sort of respect, that your ideas are important, then you're afraid to fail forward then.
Hey, can you guys, I heard my microphone was kind of cutting out. Am I sounding better now? I'm sounding better? Okay, cool.
We gotcha.
Gotcha. So yeah, and I would have to just really piggyback off of what Talia is saying here. One of the qualities of the mentors that we had in this whole campaign and really in the whole development of Bridgemakers as we know it today was really they just had their ears open the whole time and asked a lot of questions. So here's a good example. We were hosting conversations around what students wanted to see in their education system for a long time in partnership with 100 Days of Conversation. Shout out to Aaron. And I just remember interviewing this 6th grade class. And I kind of started out by I guess, throwing ideas into the mix. And then I realized that once the 6th graders, they really started talking, they were running circles around in terms of like how we could do better in school. They were running circles around me. They had amazing ideas. And I just kind of decided to, I made a decision halfway through the conversation to not declare anything and to only ask questions throughout that entire conversation. And that was the greatest fruit of the conversation was from that, just asking questions to the young people. So another thing that we know that's really important is that for a very, very long time, everybody wants young people to work for free as a volunteer, right? We got bills to pay and we got stuff to do. Also, there's other ways that they could be out there making money, and not all of them are legal, all right? So what we decided was let's give these young people a job Let's give them a job. Let's give them mentorship on top of that, caring adults, pushing them and guiding them. Amazing things happen through that.
It's really incredible. Now, I know we've talked a lot, outside this context around your own experiences in the public school system, right? What it was like, whether you did and when you didn't feel seen and heard. And literally, this accomplishment, this success of getting $70 million back out into the community and getting legislation passed, there was no academic credit for it. There was no school credit for it, right? And we know historically, trying to get sort of youth voice centered in K-12, which is a lot of what World Savvy works on, it's the exception to the rule, right? It's not the norm. So can you both share a little bit about your own experiences, given that you've had this transformational experience, looking back into the K-12 space? What are 3 things that schools could do to harness this power, the voice of youth as change makers, and create learning experiences that actually cultivate these kinds of genuine opportunities? Cole, I feel you itching to answer. Jump in there.
Yes, so I'm gonna shamelessly plug Bridgemakers here too, because this is what we're doing. I talked about those conversations we held with students. We talked from all the way to 6th grade to college level, and what we need to do is make everything more relevant. That was one of the biggest themes of the conversations is relevancy, and sort of directed learning, relevancy. Boom. Okay, so what we're really doing to actually cultivate this is there's no reason that schools shouldn't be community centers and places of innovation and ideas. So we are cultivating that with our Changemakers program, which same name as the conference. Great point there. So basically we go in here and we actually get to know the students first. We get to know what it is that they're interested in and passionate about, the problems they see in their community. And then we enable them to learn by getting their hands dirty, trying to actually solve the problem. So solving problems, being fully immersed in that sort of dynamic is really what helps young people retain information. When you just sort of read things 2-dimensionally, a lot of people say they just forget most of the things that they read, or they'll just do something for the grade and they cram info and then it's gone the next year. What young people never forget is that time they failed forward, is that experience when they experienced something that they had never known was possible before, or meeting that person that they really looked up to. Those are the things that young people remember. So that's the first point, is just relevancy. And that second point I mentioned there was experiential learning. Experiential means fully immersive, not just 2-dimensional reading on a piece of paper. So there's a couple.
To bounce off of that, I think an important thing is the whole system needs to be changed, because I don't think we should focus on grades, because the teacher's only going to talk to you if you're failing or not. I think we need to focus on our well-being. We need spaces where we can feel vulnerable and that we are feeling listened to and that our problems are important and that they matter. And what else was I going to say? But I think we just need more classes in mental health and how to have healthy relationships, because we can't take care of the things around us if we can't take care of ourselves. And just putting the person in front of everything, in front of the education, instead of a grade, instead of a number, if we check any boxes, I think we're just starting off wrong in the first place.
So true. It's also reminding me, we all have talked before about these sort of artificial separation between community and school, right? When you talk about relevance, Cole, and you talk about what are we actually preparing young people to move out into the world and be able to do, and how can school be a way to reflect that? And now there really is there's sort of discretionary activity, and then there's what happens in school, and there's a division. And the other piece is just, we work with so many really inspiring educators, a lot of them that are on this call, and know that it also requires educators being able to let go to create student-centered environments where students are leading and educators are facilitating that process as opposed to directing it, which is a real shift. It's a shift in practice. It's a shift in the way we think about teaching and learning. That's really important. So we'll come back to this also, but I want to hear a little bit, Marcus, from your perspective. I mean, Youth Prize has been working with young people for a long time. And so, what did it look like in practice for Youth Rise to work on this campaign? And what did you and your team need to do to actually be ready to enable youth-led systems change?
So Dana, I think what you're really talking about is like, how do you authentically engage young people in change making? And I think there's some things I've learned on the journey from Cole and team and other young people. But I think the big overarching thing is be authentic. Don't BS young people. Young people have really good BS radar. So what that means is be honest about what you can achieve and what the timeline for achieving that is. And this is very important for people in the education space because there are a lot of layers to change making in the education space. And we knew that even going in around the unemployment insurance issue. We knew we were working with the government, we were working with the legislature, with the state government, with the legislature. We know that things move slow. You know, when you talk about changing a law, that's something that people work for careers on. And we happen to do it, you know, in 18 months, which is a credit to the young people. But be honest about the timeline. And we had some young people who said after, you know, when we were hiring young people to work on this campaign, they said, you know what, I need to go be an activist. This stuff talking to legislatures where they're not listening and they're BSing you, they're moving slow. That's not for me. I need to go out and be an activist. And that's fine. But we were honest and upfront about what it took to get things done. The other piece is if you invite young people to be a part of something or you invite a partnership with a young person, be prepared to act. You know, if you're saying we want to transform education and you're on that journey, be prepared to listen and to act on what they say. I think Cole and Talia talked on it, value young people as experts. And what that means is there needs to be some payment, there needs to be some credit, there needs to be something that you provide that recognizing them as an expert in their own experience, in their own lived experience. Talia talked a lot about something I always hear for young people related to education is they always talk about the practical things they want to learn to do. I want to learn how to have a good relationship, a healthy relationship. I want to learn how to do my taxes. I want to learn how to, you know, change, you know, a light fixture. I want to learn how to, you know, manage my life, change a tire. I want to learn how to do those basic things that help me live and thrive. And a lot of times the curriculum in the school system isn't structured around that. And so when you're trying to create these changes, there are a lot of entrenched, and the educators know this better than I do. There are a lot of entrenched systems and practices that prevent you from changing those things very easily. So being honest about that. I would say the biggest thing I learned from the employment insurance work with young people is to just be bold and be courageous and stand up. You know, it wasn't easy for us to take a stand and sue the state of Minnesota. But one thing that helped us was I talked about the with and for of our mission, and that our board is comprised of young people. We had Malcolm on our board, who was a young person who was working at Subway. And he lost his job and he was in a similar predicament to Cole. He received a check and he didn't, and they asked him to pay it back. And so as a leader within an organization, when you're going to a board and asking the board to sue your largest funder, it helps to have people who have intimacy with the pain. And a lot of times our boards and our organizations are structured in ways where people furthest from the intimacy of the pain or the least proximate to the issue are the ones making the decisions. And it's hard to really touch and feel the gravity of the situation when you're so far disconnected to it. So one of the things that as a leader that I've had a commitment to is really continuing to authentically engage young people in leadership. And even as the new kind of leader of Youth Prize, I look at my calendar and see how much of my time is budgeted in talking directly to young people and listening directly to young people, because I think that's a value that is important, that keeps us relevant, that keeps us, conscious of the realities that young people face. So I'll stop there. see if there's any thoughts, Talia, Cole, around what I'm saying. Does it resonate or am I off? Oh, one other big thing. Y'all young folks aren't always right. And I think that's a part of authenticity, telling young people when, that's a bad idea, I think, from my perspective. And we have to do that if we're really serious about moving the needle with young people. We have to challenge them, just like I would challenge an adult or Dana. If I feel like Dana was saying something that's right, I need to tell Dana, but I need to tell Talia, I need to tell Cole, what you're saying doesn't make any sense. It's not right. And it's not accurate from my perspective. So we need to have that robust conversation. Go ahead, Cole.
I wanted to bounce off of that right away. Like what I was hearing from what you're saying is like, don't sugarcoat things for young people. Seriously, they've like they can handle it. Like I was talking about those sixth graders, I didn't sugarcoat anything for them. I let them know like really how the world is. And it's the same with Changemakers. When we go into schools, we let them know how the world really is, because if you just tell them everything's cool, it's gonna be fine, and you make it all rosy, then they don't actually know what problems they need to solve to get to the answer. And so like a great example in the unemployment campaign, we're like, Marcus is like, yo, y'all are gonna have to go up against the business community that has a crazy stronghold on the entire legislature, and especially on the Republican side of things. And so rather than be like, oh, we got this, is whatever. So I'm like, all right, bet. So I did a bunch of research and went into business communities, even Chamber of Commerce, regional chambers of commerce, and we talked business. We talked, okay, so if we're doing this to our workers right now, right, we're gonna have way more economic hardship in the future than if we invest in our people right now so that they can actually save up and go to college and they can actually start their own businesses and be on their feet and not be, you got to say it in terms they understand, right? I think this is kind of dumb, but like, so that they're contributing rather than, I guess, taking government services further down the line as well. And people resonate with that, right? And, Marcus was real with us, so we were able to get them on our side. That's all I would say, bro. Just, yeah, be real, and like Marcus said, we ain't always right. Young people don't know what we don't know, essentially. And, challenging us when we're wrong is a really good way to help us grow.
Yeah, it's the perfect way for us to get better. Everyone's gonna be wrong, but why sugarcoat it? Because we can handle it too. That's just how we become better problem solvers.
There's a couple.
I would also say on the other end that I've grown in my perspective and how I think about things from engaging with young people. And I have, we have young people who have been on staff for a while who I've built really strong relationships with, where we've gone back and forth on issues, in terms of the old school perspective versus the new school perspective. And I've learned that I'm actually old, and I didn't know I was old. But I am. And so you have to recognize that. Don't think that you're not old when you're really old. Anything, we had another convening where someone said, I'm not old, I'm 30, so know when you're old.
I love that, because we didn't really define young change maker. I was just leaving that to the imagination and suspension of disbelief of the group. But I would love to hear you talk about specifically, because this was a really fascinating and effective part of how you all work together, was the intergenerational and working across generations, where there were different vantage points on change. Marcus, you talked about, realizing that you were old. You had to bring in people who had different conceptions, different experiences with how do you apply pressure? What does progress look like? The pace of that progress. And if you can talk a little bit about what that looked like and how you navigated it, I think it's a really important part of the story, that that change is also messy. This is messy on the back end.
Oh yeah, no, definitely. I don't know how many people have done coalition work, but coalition work ain't easy, when you have very passionate people working on different issues. And one of the big challenges we had when we saw young people who were really struggling to make it, to pay bills, and they were scared because they were getting these threatening letters from the government, And even after we had the victory where the Court of Appeals said pay young people, there were still delays, significant delays in young people being paid. And so we're on the front lines. We were hearing the stories of young people. They were telling us, and we knew they couldn't. They were having trouble eating. They were having issues with housing, all the issues that you normally have that were exacerbated by COVID. They were dealing with those issues. And so we were trying to navigate the balance between applying pressure to the state to enact some of these changes that we had secured through legal means, and also balancing that with the fact that we were also trying to fight for a permanent fix to the law. So there are different strategies around how do we use social media to really call people out? How do we, be diplomatic? How do we use our attorney and our legal apparatus to really try to push the state to execute on some of these things? And so I'll give you an example where we had one person who was in his 70s who had been doing this for years and really fed up with government, regardless, Republican, Democrat, he hated them all because he saw young people getting the short end of the stick over decades. And so he was one of the most fierce social media advocates for young people there was. He was calling people out, calling people racist, calling people, taking kids' money. And I was being tagged on some of those posts. And I was like, look, I called him up. I said, hey, I'm the diplomat. I'm in the organization trying to make this work. You can't be tagging me on these posts where you're calling people racist. I respect that you care and all this stuff. And I said, in fact, I think people are just trying to navigate this situation, and we need the support of our government stakeholders to really get this radical change. And he gave me a history lesson. He told me about the civil rights movement and how you had different people who had different approaches, those who had more diplomatic approaches and those who had more radical approaches, and how all of those approaches were valuable in the fight for change and justice. And I said, okay, you're right, but I need you to stop your social media activity. And he said, well, you have 24. I said, you're right. And I said, actually, I do think that when you're out here calling people racist on social media, it does help me get people to move a little bit better because I'm actually the better option than you. And he said, and I said, but I need you to stop for a little bit. And he said, okay, you have 24 hours. And so within 24 hours, we were able to get some of the changes we wanted. But that was the tension, that was the tension we were dealing with in the moment. And the lives were really being impacted in really deep ways. And we had different perspectives. And a lot of times the young people always wanted to go on social media and go guns blazing. Am I wrong, Cole? That was generally the perspective. And we were trying to be more, I guess we wanted to tell the stories of how young people were impacted. We thought that would have the greatest impact. And so we found a balance and we worked together, and we ultimately got things done. And that we had a lot of really wonderful media coverage of the issue. And Cole was featured in a lot of that.
Our great mentor, John Bacall, actually just dropped those media features in the chat. Just wanted to shout that out for anyone who wants to check it out. I do want to, there's a couple of really amazing questions in the chat. And so I did want to sort of take us off the rails for a second here. And just, Linnea asked a question is like, what is one thing that we as young people can tell to adults to stop saying or doing when they're engaging us, right? And I think that one of the biggest things is like, everyone who's trying to engage young people is a lot of talk. And as a young person, what you can do is say you're talking a lot, but show us some action. And I want to shout out to Ann Mitchell, who is in the call right now, and Ann Mitchell from MDE. We have done some work with educators doing conferences and whatnot. And one of the things that Ann really showed me this graphic that was super mind blowing. And something that I really agree with is that you need to be in constant communication. You need to be having a figure eight going of communication. So on this side, you actually listen to the young people. You come over to here, they're going to tell you what they want, right? Once you listen to them, you're going to come over here, you're going to implement a solution. And then once you implement the solution, it usually ends there. What you got to do is say, here's the solution we implemented. Is it good? Do we need to change it? Do we need to, and it might be something as simple as adding 15 minutes onto recess. But as an adult, when we're talking about young people who have been um, already run through a traumatic system of education, and have been, you know, told that that idea is dumb, or you can't do this, or just you know, keep reading your books, right? Just go to college, this that and the other, when they have already been shown that their voice doesn't matter. You can't just say your voice matters, this that and the other, and then expect like everything, you know, the sun comes out and it's all rosy and peachy and there's a rainbow right away. No, that's not how it works. You got to go, okay, you want 15 more minutes of recess? Even if you're like, that's stupid, can't you guys give me something more? Go and do it. Give them 15 minutes. Come back and be like, look, I actually acted. I did something. All right. And then they're going to be like, oh, okay, bet we could get away with that. What if we like change the whole structure up and we had flexibility of our schedule? And then they're going to be like, what if we had, what if we had businesses come in and like show us demonstrations and stuff? What if we did more field trips? Then you're going to start seeing them dream and come up with really big ideas once they, you know, figure out what they can get away with. And then another really awesome question is, quick shout out Project Success. I see y'all in the chat. Um, Another really great question is like, I just want to pass this on to Leah. Talia Connor asks, as a teens mental health advocate, wondering what else you think, how we can elaborate on like how the school system is currently failing young people and their well-being.
Well, yeah, as a teenager in high school, like I didn't even know my mental health was dwindling. You know, I was turning to a lot of self-destructive behaviors, and it didn't take me till, or being in high school, that conversation wasn't even thought of, like me possibly going through something that was never considered until like after getting out of high school and like being around such great people like my bridge makers, and like allowing that conversation of, oh, maybe I do need therapy, maybe something is wrong. And I think like just putting the person above their grades, you know, and like really just trying to connect with them instead of putting their grades above them. And I was thinking like, you know, the main goal of school shouldn't be to get them prepared for college. The goal should be to just give them mentorships, make them feel heard and seen, and that their needs are going to be taken care of. And yeah, give them mentorships, and then maybe, yeah, what Cole said, like having businesses come in. So we should be giving them experience while they're in school so they can potentially get a job in the field that they're interested in through purpose-based learning.
When I
That's
find
so
something,
interesting. Oh,
go ahead, Marcus.
that's so interesting, Talia. In all of the discussions I've had with young people around education, and there have been numerous, I always hear them talk about what they want from their teacher. They want their teacher to hear about them beyond being a student. They want to hear about them as a person. And that's what you hear time and time again. And that's what I hear you saying, Talia. And it's just it's a tough situation because a lot of these schools and systems aren't structured there's so much pressure on teachers around grades and tests and a curriculum that I don't know if it's relevant or not to today's. I know Cole's perspective on that, but I'm not in the formal education space. I'm in the youth development space. But what I will say is that, you know, there are things within youth development that I think we need to blur the lines and really think about how do we facilitate deep learning in our community. And so the building of school, I think, probably becomes, and it's not necessarily that it's less important, but how do we create environments where young people can learn and grow, and how do we incentivize learning? And I think right now we're trying to incentivize people getting a certain grade on a test, and it may not even measure what's even important for people to be productive citizens and thrive.
I can't I can't second and agree more with what's being said. And I think maybe Cole, you said this the last time we talked, or it's, you know, this is definitely not an original thought, but that people don't care what you know until they know that you care. And that in the context of K-12 is often a really absent thing. And I think the other thing that's coming up as I'm listening to this is really the core of engagement efforts for like youth engagement are often developed and conjured by adults without that figure eight listening process that you're referencing, Cole. And so if you want deep learning, then you have to have engagement. And if you want engagement, then you have to know how it's defined by the people who are most proximate to the work. So I think it's just incredible. We're naturally moving into some of the questions. So I want to invite individuals who have a question to drop it in the chat, or you can come off mic. I've got some here I can kind of dive in with. And so, one of them is just tactical. Yeah, go ahead.
I'm sorry. There's just something in the chat around change as a threat. And my big question is, how can we incentivize what works, you know? And I think we've been trying to maintain current systems, but we can find ways to create incentives for people to do things that work. I know a lot of teachers that would love to transform the system. There are a lot of people who are entrenched in the status quo, but there are also a number of people who feel stuck within a system that they see is not operating effectively or doesn't work. And part of it is about the system is designed to preserve itself. I mean, we at Youth Pride say, you know, all these systems are designed to get the outcomes we get. And so we have to figure out how to transform and interrupt the current practices. I'm sorry, Dana, but go ahead. I just want to comment on that comment.
No, absolutely. I think that's the critical way to tie it up. One of the questions coming in for Talia and Cole, like what were some, Cole, you described being in these rooms, like sort of sitting with power players in this larger ecosystem. What are some of the takeaways from that? Like, what did you learn by kind of being at the table about those stakeholders?
I think my biggest takeaway is that there's, you know, roughly two kinds of leaders. You know, there's those who care and there's those who say they care. And when we are dealing with folks like this, you got to know what the strategy is based on who you're dealing with, right? For those that care, oftentimes the problem is they are just ignorant as to how to really connect with young people or as to how to really connect with community. And oftentimes, I mean, if you think about government, you know, government, they've got all this money that they're trying to spend on the community. And you know, if they try to engage community, they might get like four people that show up that aren't even the community that they're trying to directly serve. I mean, we see stuff like that all the time. But oftentimes what it is doing that thing we talked about, like, okay, you're saying all this, now show me, like challenging people in power who really do care to go and act on things and then to stay in communication with you. That's a really good strategy in terms of working with that sort of people in power. Now, the other sorts of people in power who just sort of say that they care, you know, their greatest weapon against those who are trying to change something is ignorance. And so the way to combat ignorance is, you know, in school, they didn't teach us that you can go and look at the 990 tax forms of organizations to see, you know, where they're really spending their money and if they actually care about what they care about, right? If they got $4 million a year and they're spending $3.5 million on staff and then, like, you know, just a little tiny chunk on their programs, do they really care about those programs, what they're doing with folks? And that's one example. But the other thing is utilizing social media. You know, I think social media is a way that a lot of people have created disinformation, misinformation, confusion. It's also our greatest weapon against that in creating clarity and creating something that we can see and hold people accountable to. I mean, this is one of the biggest sort of messages we had in the unemployment campaign is like, yo, legislators, we are watching you and we are voting. Like, so, you know what I mean? Like, you can't, so don't just think you can make a little back table deal or whatever and think that we're not going to see it and act on it as stakeholders of this entire freaking country, right? So I think that's one key thing is you just have to show people, for people who say they care, you let them know that, hey, we're watching. For people who do actually care, really challenge them on that communication and iterative implementation piece of solutions.
I'd say my biggest takeaway is just realizing that we are capable and that we are the proof that our voices are loud enough. And what is scary is that when there's enough people speaking up and then nothing is done. But I think we're just loud enough now. And how can there not be any change when there's this much discomfort, you know?
Truth, truth. Thank you both. Marcus, there's a question that flips that same question to you and I. I'd just quickly add that sitting at tables with heavy hitters in ecosystems, my learning has often been, it almost has never changed in 20 years, that there's this aversion to complexity. Like systems change and social change is complex. Sometimes it's 4 steps forward and a couple steps back, or sideways, or in a circle. And the messiness of it that, you know, Marcus, you captured, and Cole and Talia, you captured, is it has to be there to progress, because so many of these things can't wrap up in a neat bow. And I think, generally speaking, our systems, and particularly education, where World Savvy works most deeply, isn't really necessarily set up to respond to that, to be iterative, to be responsive. And so that's a piece that's definitely resonates with me. And Marcus, I don't know if you have more to share with that.
Yeah, totally agree. And just to add to that, I'll just offer a simple quote, Frederick Douglass: "Power concedes nothing without demand." And when you are dealing with folks who are elected and in power, sometimes we have misconceptions about how much power they really have. And we have to demand the change that we want, even if they're on our team, even if they agree. Sometimes there are just things, levers they can't pull without outside push. And the reason why we got the unemployment insurance victory is because we demanded change. You know, all those articles that John posted on the thing, we were from the New York Times to the MinPost, from the Star Tribune to Beyond Care 11. I mean, I think it's, 70 different or more different articles that we were on. We were writing blogs. Young people were on social media. They saw on social media the stories of young people from, Minneapolis to Mankato to Duluth to St. Cloud who were impacted by this issue. And so young people demanded the change we want. That's why I'm saying young people are the secret sauce to all of our issues in our community, because they're the ones that know how to get dirty, down and dirty, and fight for the change and demand the change that we need in our community.
I'd piggyback off that too and say something that
I knew you were going to piggyback. You wanted to piggyback off that, Cole.
Badly, because here's something else we learned. As young people, we got something that the power structure wants: our vote. Okay, both the Democrats and the Republicans right now are figuring out, yo, how do we get these young people on our side? How do we get them to want to vote blue or red or whatever? And I think that's a big part of politics, right? That's what the parties are thinking about. They're like, oh man, we got to get this next generation on board with us. So anyway, we use that to our advantage. You got to be strategic.
And you were speaking of strategic. One of the things that we haven't talked about that the young people did is we partnered with the AARP to change the state law. And in even times when they tried to divide us from working with our oldest workers, our most seasoned workers, we didn't. We kept that allyship, we kept that partnership, and we worked together to change that state law. And there were even strategic times where it would have made sense for us to do our own thing because we had more momentum. We had the legal victory, but we worked in coalition with unlikely partners. And I think that's another thing that I don't want us to lose in all this: bringing people together across difference to fight for change and to identify shared pain, because there's a lot of shared pain across difference. If we can figure out ways to address that, we can make some real change. And that's one of the things we did strategically that I think was really, really powerful. And Cole was on a call with a Social Security recipient, and they were both talking and co-facilitating. It was beautiful. It was wonderful. And it was a part of our success.
I love that. And it's a great transition to some of the kind of closing comments we want to make, and Talia, to hear a little bit more about your artwork. Just this idea, it's certainly in an era right now of such extreme polarization. There's active energy being spent to divide and create division. That strategy was essential, and also just sort of fodder for social cohesion, right? How do you get people back to seeing, to thinking about a common cause? One of the last questions there, and we'll try and put this in our follow-up communication to everybody in terms of the playbook, was really around, thinking about how we we sort of take global action locally. And I think so much of what's happening now, if you think about the Sustainable Development Goals or global movements that need to take place, what Cole and Talia are doing and what Youth Prize helped to support and enable is activating global action in a place-based way. I mean, that's where it really starts and where it resonates. It's changing, institutions that do or don't create equitable conditions for folks. So we'll talk more about that in our follow-up. There's another great question about equity of voice in youth communities. And so what we're going to do for the attendees today is make sure we're kind of corralling some of the answers to questions we didn't get to, and sending those back out as a bit of a playbook for you to dive into. I do want to announce a couple of things here as we're closing out. We have 2 winners for the unbelievably beautiful artwork that Talia has created, and I think we have a slide that's sharing that. Her LinkedIn is right in the chat right now. And Talia is going to read her artist statement for us and talk a little bit more about her work. But I will announce that the first winner that was selected before today is an educator, which makes me so happy. And I saw you pop on here, Catherine Willow. You are the winner of sort of the pre-drawing for Talia's artwork. And I think we're going to bring that up on a slide. Talia also has a website, which is in the chat that you can get to. And then for those of you who have been tweeting, yes, Catherine, you're welcome. For those of you who have been tweeting, we're going to randomly select someone who's tweeted using this hashtag tomorrow to receive a second piece of Talia's artwork. So Talia, will you just take a moment or two and share with us your process and your art before we close out tonight?
Yeah, okay. Like I said in my introduction, as a young person, I had trouble finding an outlet for myself. I had so much drive, so much direction, but nowhere to put it. In my senior year, I created SOUT, and in return, SOUT has created so many opportunities for me as an entrepreneur, organizer, and community member. SOUT has, I could honestly say SOUT has transformed me into the person I am today. And so in the picture, SOUT is standing tall while the city of Minneapolis is standing behind him, supporting him and absorbing the universe it has cultivated. My hometown, Minneapolis standing behind him, supporting, and SOUT, who represents myself and any other youth trying to take control of their future. The wave of colors represents the ideas flowing through our youth and through our mentors and through SOUT. And the speech bubble represents a blank slate, so anything could be said. And that's pretty much it.
It's beautiful. Thank you so much, Talia, for offering that. I want to leave our audience tonight. Thank you so much for joining us. We had over 100 people with us this evening, just with a big push and recommendation to check out the work of Bridgemakers. The website is in the chat. Ways to support Bridgemakers is also going to be in the chat, and we will follow up with a communication for those of you registered so that you know how to do that. World Savvy has been talking with Bridgemakers for months about how to sort of collectively combine our power in the K-12 space, because K-12 is long past due for a transformation. So it's relevant, connects kids to real world issues, and creates the space for them to drive change. And it's been a real privilege talking with you, Talia, Cole, and Marcus, and just want to both congratulate you and just I'm humbled by all you've been able to do, and I can't wait for what's next and to see and watch. So thank you all so much.
Final statement.
Thank you.
May I make a
Yes,
final
of
statement?
course.
So I want to talk about what's next. Everyone, thank you for joining us here. We talked a lot about the problems, amongst those being that this $1 trillion a year system of education is, built in the industrial era, preparing students for jobs that are being taken for robots, traumatizing them, not caring about their mental health, forcing them to be, in one place in a desk for 7 hours a day. And on top of that, it's not even doing the job that it's set out to do properly. And it's the largest freaking line item on like every state budget. So that's a great use of our tax money. Anyhow, I just want to go ahead and say that the solution is creating a whole entire different model. And that's what we're doing here at Bridgemakers. Ladies and gentlemen, the 21st century career and purpose-based learning exploration labs are coming. Shout out to Osborne 370 and Dario. Shout out to, as well as Adrian Dierks and Project Success. These things are coming. We're going to have the space with high growth future industries. such as tech and trades. Super excited about this work. And if you guys want to support the solution to the problems we talked about here today, I am dropping the link right in chat. There we go, bridgemakers.we did it, and that is where you can donate, and bridgemakersmn.org is where you can hit us up. Also, my LinkedIn is somewhere in this chat, and I am really looking forward to continue, doing work with amazing educators and leaders such as yourself. So thank you, everyone. Have a really wonderful night.
Thank you all so much. Thank you, Cole. Thank you, Talia. Thank you, Marcus. And thanks, everyone, for spending your afternoon/evening/ potentially morning, depending on where you are. We had a global audience today. Thanks again, and stay safe and healthy and well. And make good trouble.
We want the power for the people. We're unable. Protect them and those. We must build up a trust, and we want the power for the people. That's all we ask in our country, dear. The sick and the hungry are unable. Protect them and those who may live in fear. Power for the people. Power for the people. Power for the people. Power for the people. Hardening crimes is a part of the times, and it's rough for some people to live. Disease can move fast, but it don't have to last. It is now the nation's turn for all to be concerned. We can be freer still. It is the people's will, and bring back the power for the people. That's all we ask in our country, dear. The sick and the hungry are unable. Protect them and those who may live in fear. Power for the people. Power for the people. Power for the people. Power for the people. Power, power, power. Power, power, power.